The impacts related to the COVID-19 outbreak and spread are like nothing any of us have ever experienced. The COVID-19 pandemic poses threats on multiple levels. It poses threats to our physical health. It poses threats to our financial well-being with the economic downturn that's currently taking place. And it poses threats to our emotional and our psychological well-being because of the social isolation that we're having to go through. The threats that I just mentioned are real. They are not a hoax. They are not politically motivated, and they require our attention and our action. As with any perceived threats, we humans tend to respond in ways that are hardwired into our brains. Some of those ways are referred to as the 3 F's: fight, flight, and freeze. And there are good examples of all 3 of these. Good examples that can be seen on the larger scale. There are shortages of respirators for treating people who have come down with the virus. And so recently, the president used the War Powers Act, FIGHT, to get more respirators. Now, what about flight? Well, we're hearing that people in areas that have been hard hit by the coronavirus are trying to get away into more remote areas. People from New York City are going out into less densely populated areas in New York State. And people from all over the country who have summer homes here in Montana are coming to our area. And what about freeze? Well, if you think about the current order by our governor to stay in place, to stay at home, that's a large-scale example of the freeze response. So, when we perceive a threat, our brain and our body go into a state of hypervigilance. Our focus narrows. We direct all of our attention and all of our energy toward dealing with that threat. This narrowing of focus and the fight, flight, or freeze response are normal. They're natural, and they are frequently very helpful. Notice, I said frequently, not always. For short periods of time, going into a state of hypervigilance, accompanied by a narrowing of focus and the fight, flight, or freeze response, can help us address the threat we are facing. But when the threat is prolonged, such as the current situation with COVID-19, our natural response pattern may become harmful. Our natural response to focus all of our attention on the threat can become an additional threat to our safety and to our well-being. The title of today's sermon, Liberation Through Redirecting Attention, is related to the threat our natural and instinctual response to the threat can pose. So I want to be very clear at this point. I am not suggesting that by redirecting our attention, we can liberate ourselves from the impacts of COVID-19. We don't have that power. We can, however, take effective action to liberate ourselves from the compounding threat our sustained focus on COVID-19 may create. Facing a threat, any threat, adds significant stress to our lives. The first person to use the word stress in relationship to people was a Canadian psychologist named Hans Selye. Previously, The word stress had been used primarily in industry, particularly the aerospace industry, in regards to physical materials such as metals. Selye recognized that stress is normal. Stress is something we experience every moment of every day. He identified 3 types or levels of stress. The first is the simple word stress itself. This is typical in everyday situations, and it includes such things as the pressure that gravity puts on the body. The second one he termed distress, and that is excessive and or long-term stress that significantly taxes the body's capabilities and capacities to cope. And finally, he coined a new term. That term is eustress, E-U-S-T-R-E-S-S. Eustress involves positive experiences that energize, that excite, that enliven, that encourage, and even rejuvenate us. So with these in mind, let's think about COVID-19. COVID-19 is a long-term threat. It will be a threat for months or even longer. In order to deal with such a long-term threat and the stressors it creates, we need to find ways to reduce the likelihood that we go into a downward cycle, down, 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 into distress. We have limited ability to alleviate the threats that COVID-19 presents. We have significant ability, however, to reduce the stress caused by getting stuck in the instinctual fight, flight, or freeze response pattern. So when I refer to liberation through redirecting attention, I'm saying we need to change what we have the ability to change. And what do we have the ability to change? Where we focus our attention. We have the ability to free ourselves from the chains of the brain's instinctual and normal hypervigilant threat response pattern. We have the ability to redirect our attention for periods of time. We have the ability to allow our minds and our bodies to relax, rest, and recuperate. To cope with the long-term stress COVID-19 will create, we need to save our strength. We need to build our stamina in order to deal with this threat over the long term. What are some ways that we might redirect our attention? Here are just some examples. Spending time in nature or in watching nature. For example, I don't know how many of you saw the sunrise this morning and looked at the clouds and the beautiful colors, but that's one way. There's exercise, walking, doing yoga. And then there's reading for fun. Notice I said fun, not to get the news. Now, I don't want to forget play, especially play that includes laughter. And there's connecting with others. And when we connect with others, taking time to share uplifting stories and information. And what about engaging with or in the arts? The arts such as music, painting, dance, and of course, hobbies. And there's so many hobbies: knitting, crocheting, quilting, sewing, cooking, baking, golf, fly tying, woodwork. And some of those hobbies are being used by members of our fellowship to make face masks for the hospital. And then there are spiritual practices such as meditating and prayer. This is just a short list. I'm sure there are many other areas that would be helpful for us to direct our attention to and our energy toward. I would ask you now to take some time to jot down things that you can do to positively redirect your attention. Write down as many things as you can think of so that you have a list that you can refer to in the days ahead and the weeks ahead. Now, think about when you can or when it would be beneficial for you to engage in the activities you have listed. When would it be important for you to turn your attention away from the concerns, the issues related to COVID-19, and to put all of your attention on the things you've listed? Next, make a commitment to yourself that you will take time every day, as often as you need to redirect your attention to things that you have put on this list. This isn't a commitment anybody else is going to look at. It's a commitment for you to make with yourself. All of us must do our part to slow the spread of COVID-19. We need to practice social distancing. We need to limit our time out in public spaces. We need to wash our hands. Yet, even if all of us do this religiously, we aren't going to end the existence of COVID-19 in a day or a week. We will be contending with this virus for a while. As we continue to contend with this virus, we can increase our own capacity to endure throughout the time this disease will continue to be a threat. We can increase our capacity to survive and even thrive by taking charge of our attention and countering our instinctual tendencies. In the days ahead, my wish is that all of us will be healthy, physically, mentally, and emotionally. To get and to retain that health, I hope all of us will regularly and frequently take the time we need to redirect our attention and liberate our minds from the quicksand that focusing on this threat can get us stuck in. May it be so.